I could take a break from this world. Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna be a lost girl and fly. Take a breath, feel my wings spread, levitate above the ground and make eye contact with clouds. Now I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free. Finally, I wanna be free. I wanna be free. I wanna be free. I always stay dreaming, never imagined I lose my spark. Living in this crazy time, putting back the pieces of my mind. I know how to run from the dark and fly. Feel my wings spread, levitate into the clouds. I'm so high above the ground. I'm rising, I'm soaring above it all. I just wanna be free. Finally, I wanna be free.
Race, conversations, and law enforcement. This is Moses' People Speak. Well, welcome to another episode of Moses People Speak. I'm your host, Terry Watson, the founder of Strategies for Justice. Today, we're going to have a great conversation. And I was saying backstage, I meant to read most of the book on vacation, but during the packing, it got left behind in the house. So now I'm going to take some time reading the next couple of days. But we're going to be discussing An Inconvenient Cop by my brother, Lieutenant Edwin Raymond. For those who don't remember, Lieutenant Edwin Raymond was part of the NYPD 12 and has been is also part of the subject matter of the Crime and Punishment documentary. So with that, I'm going to bring my brother Edwin with me. Here we go. Edwin, how you doing, brother?
Peace, brother. How you been, King?
And I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I got to say that I did crack it open when I first got it. I started getting into the pages, and I was like, all right, I'm going to read this on vacation. Put it to the side, but now, I'm doing some more traveling, so I'll have plenty of time to dig into this
Understood.
book. Yeah. But hey, so first of all, I want you to introduce yourself to let people know who you are, and also some of the things you've been involved in recently. I know that you just had your book launch event a couple of Saturdays ago. So yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself.
So my name is Edwin Raymond. I'm a recently retired lieutenant. Did 15 years in the New York City Police Department. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, Caribbean descent. My parents are from Haiti. And at 18 years old, I decided to join the police department. I joined at 22 to see how things could be different. You understand? And I didn't plan to become a whistleblower, but circumstances aligned, and that's what I ended up doing. And for 7 years publicly, I've been very outspoken about detriments in policing and things we need to do to improve it.
Yeah. And I know the first time I came across your story, actually, there was two different things. One was the NYPD 12, and I'll let you sort of explain that. Again, not giving too much away from the book itself, but let's sort of explain that part of your career. And also, I also know when there was a rally when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, and I know you also talked about that and why police should be supporting that movement as well.
Yeah.
But NYPD 12, I know if those who are not familiar with it, it was 12 police officers that were whistleblowers, right? And you were part of that group. Can you talk about that experience?
Sure. So this was back in the beginning of 2015. One of my mentors in the police department, who was a captain at the time, he told me that there's going to be a press conference where a group of officers are going to expose the quotas, because quotas, illegal quotas, racist quotas, is something that him and I discussed a lot. When I got there, that's when I realized it was some two officers I recognized, Adele Polanco and Pedro Serrano, who are both heroes that testified while still being active. They testified against the city in the famous stop and frisk case, Floyd versus NYC. But now they were, putting forth their own lawsuit, and meeting them that day, I spoke to the attorneys, they interviewed me, and they added me to the lawsuit, and they added a few. I think it started out with 5, and then it grew to 12, and it was restructured with me as the lead plaintiff, and we were known as the NYPD 12 after doing Sarah Wallace NBC, an interview that last time I checked had at least 150 million views. So, even if you've
Yeah,
never seen the documentary, you don't never heard of my name, you never heard of the anyone else, you probably saw that interview. It goes viral every now and then on different social media platforms. So it's the 12, me being the lead plaintiff, and 11 others. We basically, as active members of the service, we challenged the detriments, we challenged the racism. But you see, you'll find a lot of officers challenge racism, but they're challenging the racism that officers experience. We did that, but the racism we experienced was because we refused to be racist against our community. So our lawsuit was very different because it challenged what officers do to civilians, which was a very unique approach to risk our careers, lives, livelihoods, for civilian. I mean, that's technically what a police officer is supposed to do theoretically. So to me, it fit right into the box. But that's what we did. That's what was different about the NYPD 12. We risk it all, not just because of what we suffered internally, but because of what the department forces cops to do to you.
and again, the quota system. I think most people are aware of what that is, but I think can you sort of explain a little bit about the quota system and why it was so important for you to and other officers to speak out against it?
Sure. So, you hear people hear that police officers have quotas, but what I've gathered is they don't understand how significant that is to many of the issues that we see. They see it as more of a nuisance, as an inconvenience, as an annoyance. It's so much more than that, because many of the encounters that we see become deadly starts with what's called a broken window stop. And when you have quota driven broken windows enforcement, meaning cops are forced to enforce these minor things, every now and then everything aligns and someone ends up dead or hurt, or just ends up becoming much more than it should be, especially given the nature of the stop, the reason for the stop. So I remember thinking, after really seeing just how, influential the quotas was to a lot of police officers' behaviors, especially when things go wrong, I remember thinking, if I only get one shot, what would be the thing that I can change that would have the biggest ripple effect? And the quotas was the thing I realized, because you literally eliminate and suppress as much as possible unnecessary negative police encounters. Because when an officer is going to enforce and being forced to enforce to the point where they have no discretion, you're almost dehumanizing folks. That is a negative police encounter. And if those are being driven by pressure and quotas and numbers, but not the officer's own volition, not the officer's own autonomy is driving him or her there, then I remember thinking, if we eliminate the quotas, just mathematically, we're going to eliminate the probability of an Eric Garner or a George Floyd or a Sandra Bland or a Philando Castile, all things that start with minor stops.
Right. And I want to dive into this book too. And again, I know that I want people to obviously get it and read it. I know some folks have contacted us at SOJ talking about making it a book club as well. And one of the things I love about the book is the way that it's sort of broken up too, because it does lend for a great book club discussion. But before we dive into the book, one thing I want to ask you is now that you're retired, what are you currently trying to get into? Because I know before you was getting into politics recently, and so what is the plan now?
So throughout this journey, the 7-year journey of officially being a public whistleblower, so many law enforcement officials have contacted me throughout the nation and even other parts of the world. And at times I would feel torn because I would guide them as much as possible, but the ability to go deeper, I couldn't do it because I was still working. You understand? So one of the things I definitely look forward to is being able to be this shine the spotlight on these officers, and help elevate them, because to blow the whistle, to expose corruption, to expose detrimental racist policing in the rank of police officer and fight to make it to sergeant, get set up by your own cops as a sergeant and fight even harder to make it to lieutenant. When people in law enforcement see that, they understand how nearly impossible that is. So they figure, you know what, if he figured out a way, despite speaking out at the bottom of the totem pole and still being able to ascend, then he's someone that can help me. And I'm working, basically becoming that person that can actually help elevate what I call the justice-minded officers, people in law enforcement who can see the detriments despite being employed by the system.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful. We had a guest on a couple of maybe a year or so ago, and she mentioned something as being the equity officer. Trying to really similar to what you're saying, Edwin, is most citizens don't see police officers or trying to correct the system. And for those who don't know about the impact that it has on your career and your livelihood, is like you said, sometimes your own life. It's one of those things that we know that would stop police officers generally from
Mm-hmm.
being a whistleblower. Okay, I want to dive into your book. It came out less than a month ago, right? I saw when you first posted it, and I got it. I got the pre-order, and you know how you get a
Thank you.
pre-order for a book. You get a pre-order for a book, and you like, you still, you don't forget about it, but back in your mind is like, when is it coming? And then my son came downstairs. He's like, you got a package. I knew exactly what it was, you know. But so you got the book out there. What is it that you're hoping people to take from this book? And you could target that conversation either towards citizens or to other police officers.
Um, so I always tell people, think of anything you've ever wanted to do, anything you've ever wanted to experience, right? Especially something that you look forward to. And then think about actually experiencing it and how different it was from what you speculated. When you think of many of the advocacy around police reform, I'll even say abolition, when you think about what people are asking for, it's speculation. It's not an inside eye. So they're hypothesizing and thinking that what they're demanding is going to lead to the changes that we need. But they don't have that, again, that inside eye. What I'm hoping people do is use this as a tool to move the needle. And the way in which they can do that is by getting a better inside perspective, to better understanding of how these things operate, so they can adjust what their demands are. If you're running for office, you can adjust what your talking points are and what you're trying to reach. If you're an activist or an advocate, you can adjust what demands you're making to the elected officials, etc. Because many of the demands, again, are just, that's not what we need. But it's not their fault. They mean well. It's coming from a good place. It's a hypothesis. It's an educated guess as to what we need to do to get equitable policing, optimal policing. And again, even for the abolitionist that thinks we need to just get rid of cops altogether, it's all of it is still coming from a place of speculation. I'm hoping this book helps to fine tune the demands, and even if the demands are similar to what they were making before, they can incorporate some of the knowledge that they've gotten from this book.
I like that, and we were talking about uh, sort of the activism around policing in America with another group. and you brought up the abolishment movement with policing. There's a reduce the footprint, which is trying to limit police citizen interactions. And one of the concepts that usually goes missing is how do we get law enforcement and activists to actually come together and have those well, not just conversations, but actually be able to make progress. Because um, I also seen too, Edwin, that you could have two groups asking for the same thing, but just because of where they stand or where they sit, they won't even talk to one another. What are your thoughts about that? How do you get activists and law enforcement? One of the unique things about what you've done when you was a whistleblower was you also work with the activists in the community. And so, what are your thoughts? So how do you get law enforcement to work with activists in the community?
Oof, that's a tough one because even though I was able to do it, there were many activists that pushed back, and there are still some activists today that refuse to acknowledge the idea of a police officer being an activist. To them, the system is the cops. The cops are the system, and if you join policing, you're part of the problem. That's it. There's no fixing this because of what it's rooted in. They can't. They won't even fathom. They can't even fathom the idea of an activist being a cop, or what I call the justice minded. They don't understand that exists and it's real. It's not their faults because the justice minded don't have a platform yet. This is part of what I'm working on. Um, I'm thankful for Tamika Mallory, my brother Angelo Pinto, part of the Justice League, who first took my story to Tamika. And, Tamika is my sister today, but even she was like, Angelo, did you lose your mind? But it was after she met me, she said, she felt my spirit. She could tell I was genuine. And she
Yes.
said, I guess this is what we're going to do. We're going to try this thing out. She actually gave us the name NYPD 12. Um,
Wow.
but that's not easy. And this is this is one of the things I'm hoping to do nationally, particularly NAACP, which has become a very antiquated organization. They mean well. I don't think they do the best job in doing intergenerational work, but these are all things that can be fixed. There's no reason why every time a police whistleblower surfaces that the NAACP, civil liberties, and other groups shouldn't be standing beside that officer shoulder to shoulder. Because remember, whistleblowers do two very important things. One, things that are speculated, whistleblowers confirm. And second, probably even more important, things that you don't even know to look for, whistleblowers let you know you should shine a light over here. These are things that are crucial. These are people that need to be embraced. The justice minded should be embraced. I get it. Some people can't, they just can't rock with the idea that you see what the system does to us. You join the system, that therefore you don't care about what happens to us. It's logical, but it's wrong. It flows, it has common sense appeal, but it's not accurate. It's so many more layers, so much more nuanced than that. That's an oversimplification of something that's much more complex.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. And I've had my fair share of conversations with community members about this too, especially when I first started saying I want to talk to law enforcement specifically about race and the impact on certain communities. There was a lot of backlash, like it's them and it's us.
Mhm.
And for the Tamika Mallory, the first time I met Tamika Mallory it was probably 2020, I think it was, and it was like the day after we passed Carrio's law in Buffalo.
Mhm.
Um, and she actually said, she asked, is there any true legislation that you could point to that makes a difference? I said, well, funny enough, today I can't. Right? It was like the day after, right?
Perfect
But two
timing.
days before, yeah, perfect timing. And I had to look it up and everything on the spot. But again, I do think that there is a generation, there's a population out there that do not see policing as a partner in this struggle. So
Mhm.
I love what you're saying. So when you think about this book, and I love the title, "Inconvenient Cop: My Fight to Change Policing in America." Um, can I ask you why that title, "The Inconvenient Cop"?
So I'll be honest. There were several titles floating around. For different reasons, I was told other titles wouldn't work. You know, as a I guess a reflection of my Haitian heritage. I wanted the irony of a Negro policeman, you know, Jean-Michel Basquiat. And they said,
Yeah.
you can't put Negro on a book in 2023 on a book title. So we were going to make it an irony of a black cop, but different things happened. And then we voted on, you know, Inconvenient Cop was one of the names. We voted on it. We sent it out, and that's the one that came back with the most thumbs up. And we went with it. But, you know, it fits. It fits.
Yeah.
The title makes you think what's inconvenient. You know, you don't know where it's going, and it fits. It's enough to make you pick up the book and look at the back, maybe even open up and read the intro. You know, and it fits in terms of what I was to the system. So
Right. You know, and I would tell you my, you know, if you care to know what my thought was when I first saw the title. So when I saw the title Inconvenient Cop, the first thing that came to my mind is the work that you're doing should not be an inconvenience, in theory, right? You know, it should not be an inconvenience for a police officer wanting to have a justice-minded, you know, approach. It shouldn't be inconvenient for a police officer taking a restorative justice approach, right?
Mhm.
However, here we are, and you know, again, I think the uniqueness of that title sort of might spark in people's brains that maybe policing is not what they think it is at this moment,
Mhm.
right? Because it reminds me of a you know a thought that says, you know, if you're working in a position or a field that is supposed to be noble, right, and supposed to be honorable, doing honorable work should not be an inconvenience. But then again, I think this show is a great example. We've had folks on the show all the time that talks about, you know, the things they've been in within law enforcement, that is an inconvenient when they want to either bridge the gap, be a whistleblower, be a person that intervenes when things are happening. And so when I saw that title, I said that's probably a really good title because it's going to say to folks, well, why is that an inconvenience, right? Why is it inconvenient to be justice minded in a field that's supposed to promote justice? So, but great title. So my thought is, now, you know, law enforcement that picks up this book, you know, I think you mentioned that folks that reach out to you across the country or maybe even beyond and say, you know, either this is what I'm going through and you're trying to start something, you know, really from the ground up. What do you hope law enforcement that pick up this book, what do you hope they take away from it?
well, one of the things I learned about brothers and sisters in law enforcement is they they complete their repetitive task, but they don't see the bigger picture. The book makes it clear for them what the bigger picture is. Once you see the bigger picture, you can't unsee it. You understand? And it's harder to just go with the flow. And I'm not trying to make their lives harder, but I want them to do something. You understand? But at the same time, if society is waiting for a whole bunch of Edwin Raymonds and NYPD 12s, it's not going to happen. As a society, we have to make it the softest landing you can think about for an officer to speak out. Across industries, you want whistleblowers to be protected, coddled. You want them to be okay, right? If we allow whistleblowing to be so, detrimental to the person's personal life and career, we're just going to get a few every now and then. We're not going to get the large dynamic change. We have an opportunity if we provide the proper safe havens to have people speak out internally, because as you know, people on the inside, especially those at the bottom, they have the best experiences to understand these issues more than anyone else, but we have to empower them so that they can use their voices.
Right. And my my other question to you then, Edwin, you know, this actually sparks two questions, and I'll ask the first one. When you were going through this whole ordeal of being a whistleblower, I know that you had community support, right? I think there was a video. I wish I would have pulled it from the internet. There's a video when you were becoming a lieutenant, and there was a community gathering, that was there supporting. It was sort of like you were the community's lieutenant, right?
Mhm.
Um, my question then is, from law enforcement side, what was there? What kind of support did you receive, if any, from law enforcement? Either if it's not in your own department, either outside your department, was there any kind of support that was saying, hey, brother, you're doing the right thing, keep it going? Like, what was the support from law enforcement?
Oh yeah, officers all over reached out, mostly for that, saying, "Yo, thank you. I feel the same way about my police department." They'll get into some details there. Some of them, many reached out for assistance in their own ordeals and matters with their departments. But more locally, in terms of my fellow NYPD folks, it's funny because the chiefs, some of the upper echelon, they'll say, "I won't take a picture with you, but anything you need, let me know." You understand? Like I won't be caught in the picture with you. If you need something, holler at me. You understand? So I got a lot of that. And then, as you said earlier, um, some of them was like, "Yo, let me." Some of them felt empowered watching me win, especially me becoming sergeant after speaking out. So they're like, "Yo, put me on. Next thing you do, and I want to support this movement." And this is when I put so many of them to the test. I I said, "Yo, what are you doing August 19th?" This was back in 2017. And
Right.
and they were like, I'm not doing anything. I said, "Well, what's your shirt size?" I said, "Well, meet me at the Brooklyn Bridge. I want to show the world that Kaepernick has support from law enforcement." I
I
invited
remember
about
that.
two. Yeah, I invited about 200. 88 showed up, including, the godfather of whistleblowing, Frank Serpico himself.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a beautiful day. I'm not gonna ruin this. I mentioned it in the book. I don't want to ruin that part, but it was a beautiful day. It was also the day that I got 4 death threats.
Mm.
And like I knew the risk that the risk that I'm taking, but there's absolutely nothing, like there's no feeling like someone that doesn't know you saying they will kill you.
Mm.
It is, man. I'm an author and I can't describe that, man. There's no feeling for that.
Man, you said something a couple of years back, because you remember you were our
Hmm.
keynote for our symposium a
Yeah.
couple of years back, and you said something, Edwin, that I think I still remember to today. You said once you've become okay with death, there's nothing that can stop you. And I don't think people understood that from the, well, hopefully people understood that was watching that talk that you were giving. But you had to accept death, just to be able to say, I can have the strength to do what you're doing. And I want you to speak to that for a moment if
Yeah.
you can, because I don't think people understand the death threats that you receive, some of the backhanded comments even in the department. Um, and again, the video, those who haven't watched the documentary, and I believe it's on Hulu now. So if you have Hulu, you can watch it for free. But the documentary is called Crime and Punishment, that really talks about this whole ordeal too, which you did win an Emmy on, right? Was it an Emmy that is received? Yes, yeah,
Yes. It won an Emmy.
yes, you won
Hmm.
an Emmy. Great documentary, but the journey at that time, I mean, reflecting back on that, can you sort of share what that was like for you?
Yeah. In terms starting with the whole accepting death, and people think it's hyperbole when I say that. I'm not being figurative. You know, I mean, I write extensively about it, but think about it. Let me draw this scenario, right? Real life. When they were holding my promotion to sergeant, I had to go before an inquisition of three-star chiefs. And to scale that, a 3-star chief answers to the chief of department, the 4-star, and the commissioner. 2 people. Very, very powerful position in the New York City Police Department. It is very difficult to get the audience of just one. This inquisition that determines whether or not you get promoted when you red flagged, You have to face 3 simultaneously. It is not an easy situation to face. Not only did I face it and make my case, one of the chiefs was the chief of intelligence, who back in, I believe, 2006, refused to let the Iranian president, get off his plane. Because when heads of states fly, they're supposed to let intel know their security detail. And the plane actually had more armed guards than what they put in the sheet. So for that reason, they refused to let him get off the plane. It created an entire international issue at JFK. Washington, D.C. had to call the NYPD and say, what are you guys doing? Like potential World War III things going on.
Wow.
That man is in charge of the intelligence division that has access to technology that you don't even want to know exists. And I'm in there with my iPhone recording him, right?
Wow.
You gotta be crazy to do that. And I'm not crazy, but I accepted the consequence that could come from that. If I accept death, I can accept this consequence. You understand? And I hate, I shouldn't have to get there because of work, but I
Right.
did. And this is what allows me. This is why I say, just if we're sitting down, because I hear it and it is a compliment, but it also makes me cringe. We need more like you. You're not going to get it. This is the level of sacrifice that I've had to do.
Yeah.
It'll happen every now and then. It won't be enough to make the big changes that we need. We have to empower those that might not be willing to die, but still can see the issues and are willing to get into leadership positions to do something about it. We have to empower those folks. We can't wait for a whole bunch of folks willing to die. It's not natural. You understand? It takes,
Right.
and this is why the book is a memoir. Not many law enforcement books are very instructional, and the instructions are there. But the reason why it's a memoir is because I want the reader to understand how I became the man that I am, the things that I went through as a child, the hardships that allowed me to become this man that can deal with this today. You understand?
Yes, and I looking at it too, and it looks like the first part or the first chapter really begins with who you are, or as you said, as some of growing up before you become a police officer, sort of looking at what makes you you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing too, and this is interesting, is when you got into law enforcement, because you wanted to actually make change. It was you saw that some people come in law enforcement like it's a good job, it's good pay, and then along the way they might see something that's okay. This needs to be addressed. With
Mm-hmm.
you, again, I don't want to give away the book because I want people to go and read it. But with you had experiences as a young person that says, you know what, I need to get into this profession. I need to make change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a difference when you look at folks who enter law enforcement that say, hey, I took a test, I passed, and now I'm in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's an important piece. So one more question, and then I'll get back to the book. So when you think about you said something recently about you know uh, uh, people who keep asking about when can we have more Edwin Raymonds. You're like, it's not going to really happen. And you'd also mentioned that you have some folks come to you. We call them quiet supporters, right? They support you behind the scenes, but when the lights are on, the cameras are on, they're like, I don't know that brother, Um, you know, and honestly, I think that again, it's reasonable, right? Because it's a livelihood. They got bills to pay, families to take care of, what have you not. But my question is, do you think that also could be more detrimental to like to the citizens, the people? Because and before you ask that question, let me frame it in a way. So I was at a conference, a law enforcement conference, and I was listening to personal stories of black officers. They were saying, listen, this is what I've been going through. Talk about their own mental health as being on a job, dealing with racism, dealing with sometimes sexism or whatever it may be. Then they would say, we need more black officers to be on a job, and I'm like, wait a minute, why would we want to put more black and brown bodies in this environment, knowing that it could be detrimental to their own personal health? And I got some pushback, and rightfully so, because they're like, if not us, then who, right? Which is a fair statement. But then I think about those who know what's going on, right, Edwin? But they say, you know what, I don't want to be involved. I think the terminology that you used in the film and the documentary was little Malcolm, or they called you the something like the activist on the force, what have you not. Most officers don't want to be that role. They don't want to be seen as activists in the force. And I think one of the things that I noticed is that could be just as detrimental to citizens than if they were actually just outright being bad cops. So my question is, what do you think about that? Do you think that this knowing what's going on and being quiet, do you think that's just as bad, or not just as bad, but do you think that's also detrimental to the field of policing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, apathy is what allows things to continue. So it's terrible. But I don't think we should ignore the fact that they are able to understand it. They just don't. They just they want to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? They're not going to take the risk of speaking out because this is their job. This is their livelihoods. This is what provides resources to themselves and their family. And, so I can understand that. But of course, it's going to be detrimental because if everyone's, in Haiti, we have a saying, "Me apil shai palu," which translates to, with many hands, the load is light. You understand? If more people spoke out, you wouldn't have someone have to accept death, to speak out. You wouldn't have people give everything up and risk everything. It's like once everyone gets involved, it becomes a whole movement. You understand? Ideally, that's what we would want. But the people outside of law enforcement believing in that, they have to create the environment for that to grow.
Yes, that's another good point. And my first thought to that, I'm gonna look at the time too. My first thought to that is, what should citizens be doing? And we mentioned today supporting the whistleblowers, and I absolutely agree. And I would say support any law enforcement that recognizes there a problem and wants to address it. Right? I mean, so that's one thing. But is there any other specific things that citizens should be doing to really move this ball forward?
Yeah, one thing that I think would benefit is have a real understanding of what policing is in their respective jurisdictions, because you'll be surprised how many people never actually research much about policing. They're literally going by what they see, and they don't realize a lot of what affects their thoughts is actually fictitious portrayals of cops. You understand? Like, one thing I write about early in the book is the Miranda warning. Most people in the United States still think that as cops are slapping cuffs off, they have to read Miranda rights. And that doesn't come from research, because if they did research, they would know immediately that that's not the case. That comes from fictitious portrayals of cops. So if that one has made it right and spread so wide and far to the point that even some of the most intelligent people still think that, imagine other things that you think and other things that are at the base of your advocacy when you're asking for things to be changed. It's not coming from real research of not just policing, but policing in your specific area, your
Yeah,
geographical area. Because remember, it's the 10th Amendment that allows policing states' rights. So with states, you get even local municipalities that go even deeper into how they do things differently. So there is a commonality in policing, but it's also very nuanced depending on where you are.
yes, that is true. And again, I'm a New Yorker in heart, born and raised in New York, Queens, that is. But I haven't lived in New York in over 20 years, and I've lived in rural America, and policing from the rural areas versus the policing from big city is totally different. And
Exactly.
And I had to learn that, and again, I'll say this because, I think about local police, and I work with our local police in my town, and I know that if there's an issue, they have my cell phone and vice versa, you know. And the thing is that with big city policing, that is not always the case, right? And that was one of the biggest eye-opening things to me when I moved out of New York City, is that policing is a local thing, right? It's really the- controlled by the municipality. You can interact with your police leadership a lot easy. I don't remember the chief's name from the NYPD, but I reached out to the chief for the NYPD a couple of years ago because I wanted to do a ceremony for Samuel Battle, and I still haven't heard back yet. And that was like
Hmm.
5 years ago, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Sounds right.
So yeah, and I didn't have complaints. I was just trying to do something, community oriented, right? Um, but yeah, so Edwin, as part of this show, we always ask this one question. I'm going to spotlight you on this question, and really, I wanted to say thank you for being a whistleblower, for working with activists, for putting out this book. Again, I'm traveling this week and next week. I've been doing a lot of airport stuff. So
Mhm.
whilst I'm on the airport and travel, I'll have my chance to get through it. But the question I have for you is, what is your message to America?
Mm. The message to the United States of America is be willing to have conversations with those who are not typically in the echo chambers with you, um, because they might need to learn something from you, and subsequently you can learn something from them. If we're not willing to have this dialogue, it's we're never going to move forward as a nation. Um, it's the thing that we need. We have to be able to talk to people across the table that we don't necessarily agree with. I've done it for years, for 15 years in the New York City Police Department. I've had to discuss things with certain conservatives, and I've been able to teach many of them. And it also helps you understand how they think, so you can frame your own argument, and get it across to them. But right now, the cancel, like the echo chambers, the groupthink, the tribalism, we're not even willing to discuss things, and that is a very dangerous position to be in. I mean, we see things happening slowly, right, from January 6th to the tiki torches. Like this all stems from not being willing to speak to folks on the other side of the line. As a nation, we are headed for chaos if we don't change that.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So I'll give folks. So again, Edwin, I'll I'll be one of those individuals. So funny thing about uh, 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 books is I always try to tell people, make sure you leave a review if you can. So I'm
Yeah.
a review leaver, so I will. When I get through it, I'll definitely put some stuff in there. That's a really deep message too, because um, especially with social media and algorithms, people get really stuck in
Mm-hmm.
their chambers, and they it's interesting when you speak to someone and you say, well, I know exactly what you're consuming just because
Yeah.
of that echo chamber. So
It's
yeah.
literally what Russia took advantage of in 2016, right?
Oh yes, and so easily too.
Hmm.
So easily. So all right, brother. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Again,
too.
the book is called An Inconvenient Cop. It is available anywhere books are sold. And we did put the link into the chat as well, so people can go directly to the publisher and purchase it. Any final words ever before we end?
Just get the book, take notes, tell others to do the same. Let's move this needle. It can be done. We don't have to be cynical about this issue. Um, if we could put people on the moon, and all the modern technology and all the things that human beings are able to accomplish, we should be able to fix this thing also.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, brother. With that said, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Likewise.
That's what you really mean, ma'am. Law enforcement officers should be role models, period. If you can't be a mentor, you shouldn't have that uniform.
I could take a break from this world.
All my blinders are taken off. I can see what you guys are talking about. Y'all don't see what we're talking about yet. Policing is the law enforcement arm of systemic racism.
Well, the message for America is that they need to wake up. We need to stop the repeat. We need to stop the revolving door. And we need to come up with better ways of law enforcement. Criminal justice reform needs to reflect what it is. Ain't no way in the world somebody should be sitting in jail with a $1 bill for months.